there's no separation between us. We do the same thing, actually, for people who kind of fill their lives with making art and studying Torah and playing music, to do it out in the world, to not be closed in the Bet Midrash, but to be in deep conversation with each other. When you are out in the world, that's the place where things begin to shift.
So Hadassa, tell me about Jonah and your interest in whales.
So I'm actually a very big fan of prophets. I think Ezekiel is the first performance artist, but specifically Jonah. When I was pregnant with my first daughter, I had a dream that I am Jonah sitting within a whale. It was a high-risk pregnancy, and I didn't know what to do with that dream. And it kind of came to me in a time where I wanted something more than everything, and I was extremely scared. And throughout the pregnancy, I suddenly realized that I have to build a huge whale to contain my new family. It was kind of this, like some women crave to eat chocolate ice cream and pickles. I had to build a whale. And I would get contractions and go to the hospital, and they would say, are you playing with your whale again? And I ended up doing this huge piece of a whale that was in my studio. And I didn't really know what it was about. And people would come into my studio and say, what is this huge whale in your studio? And I wouldn't want to talk about the big whale in the studio. 2 years later, when I was pregnant with my second daughter, I suddenly had this craving of a whale again. And I remember sitting with one little daughter in my hands and the other one inside me. And I suddenly got like this prophecy. I suddenly realized that this piece was about, what if Jonah can stay in the whale and kind of be there forever? It's like kind of thinking of this whale as a place to kind of be protected. It's so scary to have your kids out of the womb. And what if I can kind of build this shelter for my kids forever? And this piece was very much about fear. I have 3 children. Each child had a whale built during the pregnancy. It's kind of a very primal thing of how scary it is to be in this life. And later on, as I spent many years building whales and taking them apart, I realized that there's a lot of minhagim that have to do with Jonah. There's a minhag to read Jonah to have an easy birth.
In this moment, when you talk about the whale being a shelter and all of the dangers out there in the world, like we couldn't have this public hAvRuTa together without thinking about your whales. And I wanted to complexify it a little bit by something that I think many readers of Sefer Jonah, of the book of Jonah, might not have really noticed, which is this whole poetic prayer of Jonah, which is really like a prayer of thanksgiving. It's Jonah chapter 2. It happens when he's still inside the whale. It reads as though it should be after he's been delivered from the whale. Vayitpalel Yonah el Adonai Elohav mime'eh hadaga. Vayomer karati mitzarali el Adonai v'ya'aneni. Mibeten sho'ol shivati shamata koli. I cried out from the belly of Sheol, and you heard my voice. It goes on to say, the depth closed about me. I went down to the bottoms, but there's a redemptive piece. When my soul fainted within me, I remembered God, and my prayer came to you and to your holy temple. And I'll sacrifice to you, and I'll offer you thanksgiving. Va'ani b'kol todah ez b'chalach. Asher nadarti ashalema Yeshuata ladonai. I was thinking maybe I was influenced by this notion because we talked a little bit about the piece. It's kind of the opposite of the simple reading of the text, that we could just stay inside that whale. In a way, I think what I'm suggesting is that while it appears to be counterintuitive that Jonah's so thankful while he's still inside the whale, it's not a plea to be released, he's already giving thanks. Maybe there is a way to see him in that instance being grateful that he's inside of it.
That's very beautiful. Actually, this really connects to this idea of knowledge. And when we read a book, when we learn something new, when we go through a pregnancy, when we go through war, we begin at a specific point, and there is a body of knowledge that we have to learn. Sometimes we don't want to learn that body of knowledge. And at the end of it, we will be changed forever. We'll be different. And there is something so scary about that transition, about the point of kind of being within the womb or within a process of learning, within writing your PhD, within learning a masechet, within making an artwork. There is no ground under your feet. You don't know who you will be in that future. In that moment, you cry out with all your might for some guidance, and you'll only understand what this process was when you will be on the other side. And maybe that's something about this being inside or being outside and praying. And when is that?
What's maybe counterintuitive here is a recognition when he's still inside, before he's been delivered, that there's something about this hard experience that is worthy of giving thanks for it.
Yeah, I think there's something about that moment of transition that has so much wealth in it. There is so much potential of what we can become. And you go through that excruciating fear or pain, and yet that's kind of what drives you to what you become next.
He seems, maybe this is an aspect of Jonah's nivuah, of his power of prophecy. Maybe his power of prophecy is that he's inside the fish, and yet he already sees the end of the story. And he already sees that there's a value to being in this difficult place. He's in a place where he can give thanks, even though he hasn't exited. But you were raising something else, which is maybe in the miklat, in this shelter of the fish, there's something to be grateful for. I'm protected from that dangerous ocean out there. I'm inside the fish. I'm not going to drown. I'm inside the fish.
What I love so much about the book of Jonah, that it really explores what it is to be in a state of fear. It explores a lot of different states of fear within it. And what do? Do you run away from it? Do you stay within it? Do you fight it? What do you hold on to? Do you hold on to the understanding that you're in a journey, that what you're seeing is only a fragment of something?
A larger story.
Right,
this book is part of a larger book.
There's a beautiful article of Rav Soloveitchik called Dodi Dofek, and kind of seeing the other side of a knotted carpet where you only see the knots and you don't see this beautiful tapestry of what reality is. And speaking of Jonah, in this time is also understanding something that maybe we lose track of, that we are kind of a dot in history and that we don't have the perspective. So right now we can only be in the whale's belly, or we can only be under the kikayon, or we are in specific states, and we still, which are very painful or kind of something we need to endure, but we don't see the book yet.
I want to just reflect on this process, this encounter between art and text, between the artist and the texts of our tradition.
There's no separation between us. We do the same thing, actually, for people who kind of fill their lives with making art and studying Torah and playing music, to do it out in the world, to not be closed in the Bet Midrash, but to be in deep conversation with each other. When you are out in the world, that's the place where things begin to shift. And we almost have this responsibility in this time to shift it. But also, I want to say that we began this conversation before the war started, and we aimed for this conversation to be about art as a form of prayer. And then a few weeks into the war, we are continuing this same conversation, but in a different reality. And there was something extremely comforting about carrying this string of conversations in this different reality. And I think this is kind of what we all need to be, to kind of carry something very meaningful within our prior knowledge into our current reality and hold on to it.
I see this, both the world of Torah study and the world of art, as interpreting our world in a way that has some message of redemption to it, that's offering some additional perspective on meaning. You know, I'm thinking that for us at Pardes, being in the belly of the whale is being in our Beit Midrash. in our house of study, that we're still here, that we're still together, that we're learning, and finding meaning in a challenging period, trying to aspire to implement the idea that Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam, that students of Torah increase peace in the world. And I think that's also a common ground in this mifgash. How can we add more beauty and how can we add more goodness in the world? There's a lot of talk of Yom Sha'acharei, what comes next after the war. So that's also part of these projects.
Absolutely. I think there is the only way to kind of survive this time is to hold on to meaning, to all the different types of meaning, of larger meaning that we find in life in order to endure it, in order to learn from it, in order to bring us to where we need to get to in our larger journey.
In a way, I think this project and our individual projects can be seen as either being inside the whale, in a very violent, turbulent world, or it can be seen as, about to be ready to go outside the whale, sort of armed and prepared by what we learned inside, ready to face the world.
Right, absolutely. I also think that in Jerusalem and in general, we each kind of live in our very contained world. And the way to move forward is to come out of the whale and have these conversations to learn from each other and find meaning.